President Trump resets his agenda. How does it play in Ohio? Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. Ohio and the country watched President Trump's State of the Union address this week and wondered what he would say and what impact it would have on their lives. The president spoke for a long time and largely stayed on script. In between praising American heroes, the president pointed to positive economic news, a rising stock market and lower gas prices. He suggested money from tariffs might replace the income tax. He called for national voter ID, saying falsely there is rampant cheating on elections. And again, he painted Democrats as soft when it comes to cracking down on illegal immigration. Democrats responded by pointing to studies that show tariffs are costing Americans hundreds of dollars a year. They say health insurance costs are rising and coverage is falling because of the loss of Obamacare subsidies. And they say Trump's immigration policies have swept up innocent legal immigrants and led to the deaths of 2 protesters in Minnesota. Herb Asher, as State of the Union addresses go, and as Donald Trump's State of the Union addresses go, I thought this was pretty effective for an hour and 47 minutes.
Compared to the disaster that some Republicans were worried about, where he would go off script and he would lose control and start doing these rambling trains of thought or whatever. In that sense, you said it was more disciplined, stayed on message, but I don't think it changed very much in terms of the political responses to it. I think it may have helped reinforce some members of his MAGA base, but the people in the middle and certainly the Democrats, there was nothing for them to be moved by it. And again, there's a risk here. He cited a lot of statistics and talked about how good the economy is, but there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next couple of months that would be, it'll come back to haunt him. Gasoline prices are going to be at the mercy in part of Canada because of the oil that they ship to the refineries down in the Gulf Coast.
Well, also a possible war in the Middle East too, but we'll get to that in a moment. But Mike, how did he do better than you expected? He focused on affordability, at least for the first half of his speech, and he pretty much did stay on message.
Yeah, I made it about an hour and 10 minutes, so I didn't make it to the end, fell asleep, full disclosure. But no, I think he did exactly what he wanted to do, because the midterm elections are all about what's your opinion of the man in the office, right? The President of the United States, it's the vote against him, up or down, and it goes downstream in all 50 states. And I think what he tried to do, my opinion at least, is he wanted to remind, in his words, that the Democrats are crazy and we are not. He brought out the USA hockey team. He did gut-wrenching stories of people who lost their children to show that we are normal, we being Republicans, and the Democrats are sitting there, they won't stand. These are the things the president stated. Those are things that resonated with people, the average person. We're all policy wonks. We hang on to every word these guys say, whether it be Barack Obama, Donald Trump, so on and so forth. But the president was speaking to independents, in my opinion, and saying, hey, the media may say I'm this, that, or the other, but here's who I am and here's who they are. You have a choice this November. What do you say?
It's a long way till November, Andrew. I mean, 2 years ago, Joe Biden gave his State of the Union address, and we thought, oh, he's on his way to a strong re-election campaign, and that didn't work out so well. So what's the shelf life of a State of the Union address?
I don't know. What's the smallest? Less than a week. I mean, just imagine what the next story is going to be.
Well, we already have it. The Clintons are being deposed this week.
Yeah. And you mentioned the potential for war in the Middle East. There's some actions happening there with the U.S. The embassy pulling their workers or their staffers out and stuff like that. So it's just, you introduce that into just the normal unpredictability of politics, and I'm sure we'll be talking about something else next week.
I thought it was really a brilliant move, Herb, objectively, to force Democrats to take a stand on immigration. It's not a black and white issue, but they've said if you were for protecting Americans or you're protecting undocumented immigrants, and he dragged that out, the whole standing thing. Did he bring that issue back under his strengths now, because he was losing it because of the ICE tactics and the deaths in Minnesota?
Well, again, it depends what happens next week, and depends what ICE does. It depends what Kristi Noem does. It depends what Kash Patel says. So it's a smart thing to do. But the Democrats, again, I don't think are all that smart when it comes to immigration, because they should actually introduce a piece of legislation that says we're going to have secure borders, and we're also going to deport anybody who's done a felony or convicted of a felony, but we're going to find legal paths to citizenship for people. And that's where I think the vast majority of Americans stand. Protect the border, have border security. And so I think they need to actually have an alternative. Not that it'll ever get passed, but they can say this is what we're for, and we're not for what the president and ICE is doing to innocent people.
Mike, did he oversell the economy? He said it was the best economy ever, but the inflation rate is down about 0.5 point from when he took office, but it's still at 2.5%. Gas prices are down, but some grocery prices are up. I mean, it's a mixed bag, and he said it was the best ever.
It is a mixed bag, if we're good, let's be completely honest. But President Trump, obviously, and every president stands up and says everything's great, and it's the other guy's fault. I'm here. It's going to take me some time to fix it. Generally, that's what they say at these State of the Unions. Everything is not great, but are things better than they were under Joe Biden? I think you can point to a lot of different categories that would say yes. Do we have a lot of work to do? Heck yeah! I was just at the grocery store before I came here, and boy, my grocery bill was expensive.
Yeah, eggs are down, but beef and orange juice are up.
Yeah. No, look. Joe Biden tried to tell the American people how good they had it, and it wasn't credible.
It's not.
And now Donald Trump is telling them that. And again, as you say, when you go shopping and you look at milk, bread, orange juice, beef, and a few other things, and you see that every day. The good news is gasoline, but that's actually very, very dangerous because that could go up very quickly. So,
Andrew, are there any coattails of this? I mean, Republicans, John Husted released a video after it saying he stands with the president, stressed affordability. Joyce Beatty didn't even attend the address. Does this have any effect? Does this speech and the policy that he laid out in the State of the Union, does it have any effect on the campaign that's about to really get going?
Well, so I saw, for instance, the National Congressional Republicans trying to make an issue out of Marcy Kaptur, who's a Democrat from Toledo, who's very vulnerable, running for re-election. She wouldn't stand when Trump asked people to basically stand if you support, fighting illegal immigration. So they're certainly going to try to make clips out of it and that kind of thing. The other thing I think it could have an effect, I saw that he commented that he called for a national ban on no excuse mail-in voting, and that's not currently in the legislation that House Republicans are considering. So if he's deciding to use the State of the Union as a bully pulpit, pushing his issues, I think it could pressure Republicans like John Husted or whoever else to kind of like go further to the right, even if it's not in their best political interest to do so. So that's something that certainly could have an effect.
As a messenger, he also has something else out there he has to worry about, and that's the Epstein files. And I think as you're getting more and more information out there, you're going to see more and more involvement by the president, prior to being president, with Jeffrey Epstein. And that will not be good for him.
All right, let's get to our next topic. State lawmakers are threatening to cut education money if recipients don't comply with state law or complain about state law. One bill would restrict money going to local school districts that challenge the state's funding system in court. Local school districts call it the bully bill, and they say it violates the First Amendment. Supporters of the move say school districts should not be using state money to sue the state education money, that is. Another bill would withhold state funding from state colleges and universities not complying with the state's new anti-DEI law. Andrew Tobias, the anti-DEI law, Senate Bill 1, as it's known around the State House. Don't universities have to comply with it anyway? Why do we need this extra thing? You lose funding. Is the compliance, are the punishments not good enough now?
Well, I certainly think that if nothing else, threatening to punish the universities could help kind of bring them along, although that bill is just passed and there's going to be just stages of actually implementing it. I know you just kind of hear Republicans say that they hear about things that they're not calling it DEI, but it basically is that. So I think, it's a common way that the legislature can kind of like basically poke the recipients of their funding into actually doing the things that they want to do and not slow walk it. So whether or not it's necessary, in terms of whether, are they complying or not, hard to say, but if nothing else, it certainly kind of is a motivating factor to make the threat itself. The
DeRolf decision, which is now 25 years old or older, that was a school district suing the state, saying the system was unfair, and the state Supreme Court ruled several times that it was unconstitutional. That would not be allowed, or would be strongly discouraged under this bill that would restrict how school districts can use money.
Again, both of these sound like bills trying to solve a problem that really doesn't exist. And it makes the legislature and the people proposing it kind of heavy-handed, particularly with respect to higher education. So they really have to decide. And it's so easy to say, oh, I heard on campus that so-and-so gave us a talk that was not balanced or whatever, or there's somebody who's upset with this. No, you don't start bullying people that way. That's not, I have a friend in California who called me, lives in the San Jose area, tech person, so tired of California, tired of taxes, tired of bad weather, tired of earthquake threats and all that, and tired of everything in California. And he wants to move. And I said, well, come to Ohio. And he uttered a line that I had heard earlier, which I thought was just, anecdotal, apocryphal, or whatever. He said, Ohio? Why would I come to Ohio? That's just a cold Mississippi. And I said, what the hell do you mean by that? And he said, well, look what you're doing to education, and look how you're attacking higher education. I said, no, that's not, we're not a cold Mississippi, we're a cold Florida. And,
Well, yeah, at least we have better weather than California, right? Mike, should agencies be threatening funding to enforce laws?
All the laws apply to all the people all the time. Period. If not, we don't have a state, we don't have a nation, we have anarchy, right? There's law. Imagine if Governor DeWine just said, we're not going to enforce these abortion, the abortion issue in the Constitution. Scrap it. Let's close Planned Parenthood. Heads would explode, right? Well, it's the laws and the Constitution. Well, guess what? We have Senate Bill 1, not a Senate bill anymore. It's in the Ohio Revised Code, Mike. And every university, 2-year, 4-year, vocational, whatever it is, they have to follow it. And if they're not following it, there's consequences. One of the levers the legislature has is to withhold funding if you don't do it. Is that ideal? No, but you have to follow the law. Now, as it relates to the gag,
it wasn't in the original law, though.
Yeah, well, you can always pass amended laws. You can
I know,
update
but
laws.
why didn't they put penalties in the original law then?
That's a great question. I think naively we just think as Republicans that if you pass a law, you will follow it. State agency, university, Ohio, whatever the university is that may or may not be violating it. I don't know which one may or may not be. But the other issue you brought up on the gag order, if you sue, I don't think that's a good idea because look, the voters, if they don't like the fact that a school district just wasted $2-3 million on legal fees, well, they can go to the ballot box and vote the school board out.
Andrew, this is not Donald Trump is doing this with states that don't comply or cooperate with his immigration policies, threatening to withhold highway funds and other funds in California and New York City. There are federal laws. If you didn't pass a seatbelt law, you lose federal highway funds. This is not a new thing.
No, this is kind of one of the tricks of the trade for trying to make sure that the laws or policies that you want to happen are implemented. So, I remember Larry Householder in 2020 started threatening libraries when there started being drag queen story hour and stuff like that. It's just something that you just see happen over and over again.
Before you propose such a law, you actually have a committee hearing and have people come in and testify and say, here are examples where the universities are not following the law. And so, in fact, they're putting out the threats without any real justification for the threats, except some hearsay or anecdotal stuff. And that's just not the way you do policy.
All right. Governor DeWine has less than a year left in his term. He has long expressed serious reservations about the state's death penalty. Ohio has not executed an inmate in his nearly 8 years as governor. He has postponed every execution to come before his desk, citing the inability to get lethal injection drugs. The governor now hints he may ask lawmakers to permanently end the death penalty in the state. Mike Anadakis, you're associated with Ohio Right to Life.
Sir.
Do you support the governor, if he does, call for the end of the death penalty?
Okay, so at Ohio Right to Life, our mission statement is to protect and defend innocent human life from conception until natural death. I'm going to take off my Ohio Right to Life hat and just leave my 27-year practicing attorney hat on right now. The law in the state of Ohio allows for the death penalty if you have a unanimous verdict of a jury of your peers, right? That is the law in Ohio. And we have a governor here who says, I don't like this law, so I'm not going to enforce it. The moratorium is not based on law. It's lawlessness, okay? Look, Mike DeWine is a friend of mine. I voted for him every time he's run for office. But legally speaking, he is not upholding the law of Ohio, which he's constitutionally required to do.
So getting back to Ohio Right to Life, they have no opinion on the death penalty. Where do they stand?
We're agnostic. We don't support it or oppose it, the death penalty, because our mission statement says to protect and defend innocent human life from conception until natural death.
So is this, polls show, Herb, 58% of Ohioans support doing away with the death penalty if it is replaced with life in prison without parole.
Yeah.
So will the legislature do this eventually, do you think?
This legislature, no. But I think a lot of people would say, okay, as long as you're telling me that the guilty party will never see freedom again, I can accept the notion of life imprisonment without parole. But I don't think it's going to happen in Ohio with the current legislature.
If there would there be enough votes, Andrew, if all the Democrats presumably voted to abolish the death penalty? Are there enough Republicans to join them to give them a majority to pass an abolishment?
So I suspect not, but when we asked House Speaker Matt Huffman about it this week, he basically said he hadn't polled the caucus about it, but he personally was very strongly opposed, and he hasn't shown that he imposes his views on everybody else. He kind of takes the temperature of the caucus, but you also had Attorney General Dave Yost come out and say that he basically backs up Huffman. So it's hard to say without actually counting the votes, but just given the split that there is in the Republican Party, and I'm doubtful that there's the votes there.
Past 6 years, there's been bills introduced by Republicans. Senator Steve Huffman, not Matt Huffman, Speaker, has introduced bills, Niraj Antani, Republicans, to abolish the death penalty, and it's always died a slow death in the legislature.
But have they ever come to a vote, or have they just not made it to the floor?
It's never made it out of committee.
But if it did, that's the key. That's where the leadership comes in. They can stop a bill from getting to the floor, but if it got to the floor, would it pass?
Because of my position with the High Right to Life, I'm willing to bet you it would fail the vote. And the Speaker's not going to bring a vote to the floor if the votes aren't there. And neither will the Senate President in the Senate.
That the votes aren't there in aligned with his opinion.
No, I think Andrew said it best. Yeah. You know, our Speaker's doing a great job. You know, he lets the legislators legislate, and when they get together in their own caucus, private, behind closed doors, they'll talk about it. The votes aren't there; they're not bringing it.
He said it would need overwhelming support, the Republican caucus. What does that mean? It's not one vote more than 50?
No, it's from whelming to overwhelming, maybe with just one vote difference. If we could say.
He'd like the first 50 votes to come from Republicans.
Yes, nailed it.
Yeah.
If DeWine pushes this becomes an issue in the campaign, right? In the governor's campaign, Vivek Ramaswamy he's kind of vague, but he says he basically supports it in extreme cases. I don't know where Amy Acton stands on it. I assume she opposes it.
Yeah, I mean, the politics of just saying that you support being tough on criminals, it's just like a pretty easy stance to stake out. And so there's definitely principled reasons to oppose it. But I think that those fundamental politics are why this issue hasn't really gone anywhere in a Republican state like Ohio.
Yeah, I've seen a Republican red state. I've seen tremendous amount of polling on this issue, Mike, because of my position with Ohio Right to Life. Ohioans overwhelmingly support the death penalty still.
So you disagree with the poll that says if it's replaced by life without parole?
I absolutely do.
Is this a generational thing, because of the lethal injection drug problems and the companies not wanting the drugs being used to put someone to death? Ohio's not alone. A lot of other states have slowed their execution rate.
Yeah. I think the average citizen is not that aware of the lethal drug problem.
Yeah.
I think they are, though, aware that when you impose the death penalty, it goes on and on and on with incredible number of court challenges, and people can be on death row for decades or whatever, and you have families of the victims who are going through this. So I think a lot of people, when you frame the issue a certain way, will say, well, look, if you can resolve it by saying that the criminal will be in jail for the rest of his or her life, that may be just neater for a lot of people.
Another thing that is influencing public opinion is the number of exonerations. Folks who are on death row, sentenced to death, and it come out that they are innocent. And that's been more and more with DNA and technology and things like that. That's weighing on some of this debate, right, Andrew?
Yeah, and I think, too, that it's kind of like, in addition to that, the position of the Catholic Church, like there's if you look at it from a coalition standpoint, there is a split in the Republican Party about this, and it's hard to say. You asked if it's a generational issue. Maybe that will be an opportunity for it to change over time.
Is there any way, there are 109 people right now on death row. Is there any way before he leaves office that Mike DeWine commutes all of those sentences to life in prison without parole?
Well, since he will not be running for office again, I'm thinking about what the last days of the Celeste administration. Remember that?
Yeah. Wow.
You know,
That's a great point.
Yeah.
What happened? Remind us, for those of us who weren't here.
Well, he commuted an awful lot of sentences, and the reaction was he commuted some sentences that shouldn't have been commuted. But if he's not going to run for office again, he can put up with the political backlash.
Do you see Mike DeWine doing that? It seems out of his personality, but if he's firm in this, you might.
I hope he doesn't, because I would remind him that he's also a lawyer and he's duty bound to uphold the laws of the state of Ohio as a lawyer.
The law allows him to commute sentences.
It sure does, but I just hope he doesn't do that. You know, I don't think that's his place, and we elect governors, not kings.
He's a former prosecutor too. That's another layer of intrigue in this thing.
Yeah, people always kind of wonder what Mike DeWine Unleashed looks like as kind of like the near end of his term. And often we just kind of see him kind of doing the same thing he's always done. But I'll say that this is one of the things that he actually really cares about. And so if you're betting on what's an area where he might kind of color outside the lines a little bit, it might be something like this.
Something to watch anyway. Anyway, time for sports, or at least taxpayers paying for sports, or paying for sports stadiums at least. As you may know, the state has agreed to use part of its unclaimed funds account to give the Browns $600 million to help build the team's new domed stadium outside of Cleveland. The state has earmarked another $400 million for other arena and stadium projects. And the teams are lining up. The Bengals, the Blue Jackets, the Cavs, the Guardians, Cincinnati's soccer team, the Columbus Clippers, the Toledo Mud Hens, the Dayton Dragons, even the Sandusky Base Bandits. It's a dynamic youth travel baseball team, according to its Facebook page. Anyway, Ohio Public Radio reports the requests total $689 million. We are challenged in math here, but $689 million is more than $400 million. And by the way, the state may not be able to tap that money for stadiums. A judge has, for now, blocked it from using unclaimed funds for private sports projects. Andrew Tobias, it's no surprise that, $400 million is sitting out there and these teams are lining up to tap it.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about making bets earlier, this would have been a really safe bet. Something like this would happen. I'll be interested to see how the money actually gets allocated. I read in your guys' story that it was unclear how or when that may happen. I have seen some Democratic legislative candidates are campaigning against this. They're basically saying that, legislators aren't adequately funding public schools, but they're giving millions of dollars to billionaires like Jimmy Haslam, who owns the Cleveland Browns. So I think it's bad politics. It's something easy to campaign against. And the question about that, though, is, voters vote on all kinds of things, and I don't think the number one issue in their minds is going to be stadium sports funding, but it's still a good talking point to oppose, I think.
Herb, this is the unclaimed funds account. It's roughly $5 billion sitting there. So, and these, if they spread the money around the state more or less evenly, isn't that a decent use of that money if it's not being used anyway? And it's a way to soften the political blowback of saying you're giving money to billionaires.
When they first did this, remember there were 3 proposals to get money to the Haslams, and one of them was selling bonds, and then I think it was the House that came up with using this money, and I thought, this is a good idea because you're paying for it all at once. There's not going to be interest payments and all that. Since then, I began to find out a little bit more about the unclaimed funds. $5 billion. Do we know how that money is invested? Do we know what the return on the investment is that we get in Ohio? Do we know how much that fund increases each year? Do we have any other needs? How about child care? How about childhood disease prevention? I'm thinking about a whole series of programs. And it turns out the money in this fund is not just simply one-time money, because there's always more money added to it because there are more unclaimed funds. And there's also presumably interest payments. Does anybody have an idea where that money is sitting?
Yeah, no, I hope it's in an interest-bearing account. Even if you get 4 or 5%.
I think I read somewhere there are some restrictions on what kind of interest you can get on anything. But anyway, it's there. It's $5 billion at least.
Let's be very clear. Not all $5 billion is open for these sports stadiums. Okay, it's only a segment that's been X amount of years. Was it 10 years or longer that no one's touched? They've went out. They've done their due diligence. They tried to find the people. They might be dead. Whatever the case is, they can't find them. So it's a limited amount of that money. Some of it's going to the Browns. Andrew did a great job. You did a great job of explaining everyone else that's asking for it. I just think that we should distribute it instead of coming back to the taxpayers, of course, if we have to do that. But be very careful in some of these. Like the Cincinnati soccer team, they just started in 2021, and they're asking for $136 million. Let's give it more to local sports fields that are dilapidated in inner cities as opposed to giving it to the soccer team.
Let's look at this. This list is funny. I mean, the Blue Jackets won $100 million. The Guardians and the Cavs won roughly $100 million for their stadium and arena. The Maumee Monkey Business Parkour, a vaulting and climbing gym outside of Toledo, wants $10,000. The Bandits, the Sandusky Base Bandits, they want $10,000. If they're going to give a billionaire owner of the Browns $600 million, shouldn't these guys get $10,000?
Actually, I kind of agree with that, Mike. Instead of giving all of it to the Big Four or Big Five sports teams, spread it around the state. Appalachia, Ohio, that might not have a baseball field, right? Yeah. The poorest of the poor, Meigs County, to give these kids something to do after school as opposed to doing things they shouldn't be doing. Let's build basketball courts and baseball stadiums.
All right, we got to get to our final off the record
that would help the kids.
Comments. Yeah. Let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Mike on the docket, you're up first.
War drums are beating Mike louder and louder, and war is hell, and nobody wants to see it. But President Trump is right. Iran cannot get a nuclear bomb. Nobody wants to see this, but we have to not just protect the United States, but the rest of the world, and I think it's coming.
Herb.
Well, I've just changed my prediction and will agree with you in part and say, at the same time, how about protecting Ukraine and doing more to make sure the Russians don't take over Ukraine? Because if they do that, there'll be other incursions by the Russians in Europe.
And Andrew.
There's a story coming out soon by my colleague Jake Zuckerman at Signal about how AEP, American Electric Power, is pushing to have the ability to, again, own nuclear plants. Basically, they are currently not allowed to own electricity generation assets. They're pushing to create what's called modular, I forget the terminology, but basically smaller than the giant nuclear plants that you see. And it's interesting they're doing this at the same time that they're threatening to leave Ohio. So it'll be interesting generally to see what kinds of policies they push for while they're, potentially trying to leverage the possibility they might leave.
Interesting. I predicted every travel baseball team in the state of Ohio will be asking for unclaimed funds should the Sandusky Base Bandits get their award. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. Reminder, if you miss a show, if you just want to share any of the brilliance you heard on this program, go to WOSU News, our channel on YouTube. Search for WOSU News on YouTube, and there you can see, share, and comment on every episode. We're also available at WOSU.org and the PBS app. For our crew and panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.